Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well and enjoying and getting through your first week of remote, online, virtual classes, whatever you want to call it, during our first week back after spring break. I know a lot has transpired over the course of the past week, or 2 weeks really, and none of us could have really foreseen what we are working through at the moment. And so I really hope that you are doing well and staying connected with friends, with faculty, with staff, and still enjoying the time you have through your Wittenberg classes this semester. I decided that, it's important for us to stay connected as a department and for you to stay engaged with thinking about your future and summer internships and what stay engaged in thinking about your time and life after you graduate from Wittenberg and staying engaged in preparing for those types of things. So I decided that though it's important at the moment for the rest of this school year for us to stay physically distant, that it's still important for us to be socially connected. And so for every Tuesday and Thursday during classes for the rest of this school year, we are going to do what I'm going to call our coffee chat time. I have my cup of coffee here with me. Please feel free on Tuesday and Thursdays at 1 p.m. to grab your cup of coffee or whatever you would typically tea, whatever, and join us, and we will talk about different topics that are related to your professional development, your future career, summer internships, those types of things. I've collected a set of topics that you all typically meet with me about over the course of the school year, and some that I wish people would meet with me about, and just some other ideas too to kind of build out a schedule of things that we're going to do during these coffee chats during the course of the semester. So every Tuesday, Thursday, 1 o'clock, live on Facebook, and then I'll post the video after the fact on YouTube as well, so that you can. So it's there for you, and you can watch it, after the fact if you can't make it at 1. These will last about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit shorter, maybe a minute longer, depending on the day, and hopefully they'll be fun for you to just take a break, get your mind off of all of the news and things that are going on right now in the world, and just kind of focus back in on preparing yourself for the future. A reminder, I am still available for all of the conversations we had when we were on campus. If you want to have your resume looked at, your cover letter, you want to talk about an interview that you have coming up, or connecting with alumni, or whatever it might be, I'm still available. Summer internship program, how to register, all of that stuff. Please send me an email. Tell me some times that might be available for you. I can meet via email, Skype, phone call, whatever it would be. And I'd love to do that. So today's topic for our coffee chat is going to be mock interviewing. And as we're going through this, feel free, if you have a question about what I'm talking about or a comment, put it in the comment section on Facebook Live or on YouTube, and I will make sure I respond to it as soon as I can. If you have questions about it, feel free to put it there. If you don't want to put it in the comment section on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to email me and I'll try to get back to you. But interviewing virtually is something that's been around for quite a bit of time, and it's now, with the current crisis that we're dealing with, probably going to be with us even more so than it has been in the past. For those of you who are in Business 365 or going through the YU mock interview program this semester, you're going to be doing a video interview, mock interview, over the next 2 weeks. We have 3 days over the next 2 weeks for you all to interview and to prepare and to help you get some experience with that. So listen in to this, and maybe this will help you get ready and prepare for that interview next week. I want to talk about video interviews with 3 different parts: the technology, the space, and the actual interview itself. Video interviews traditionally, before this crisis, were the very first interview that you might receive with a company. Of course, this varies company to company, but traditionally, it was often the very first interaction that you had with the company. And you would log on to Skype or whatever platform they had and would meet with a recruiter. And a recruiter is someone you can kind of think is the doorkeeper. They receive all the applications and then they start taking what could be hundreds of candidates and whittling them down to a few that they really think are going to be, key for the position, and then they start passing them off for in-person interviews later. So you traditionally would meet with a recruiter over Skype or whatever to answer some generalized questions to help them perceive whether to keep you in the running for a position or not. Now with this crisis, more interviews are going to probably be conducted online, especially for this upcoming summer as we're working towards, continuing to be socially distant, but getting, our lives back on some sort of track virtually. You'll probably be experiencing these interviews more often than you might have just a couple months ago. So just think about that. Usually the first interview was always some sort of video or remote activity that you would do for most companies. And now you may have to do multiple interviews via Skype before you actually get to be in person at a company. So let's start with technology. This is often the biggest issue and overlooked part of the the virtual interview itself. Everyone, these days probably has seen or, done or set up or Skyped with friends or FaceTimed with friends. And so it's natural for us to think that all of that is just easy to do and doesn't require any, extra setup. But quickly you find that when you're doing remote interviews with companies, they actually are the ones who are sending you the call invites, and they may not be using Skype or FaceTime like you would use to just call a friend and talk to them over video chat. They are probably using things like WebEx, like some sort of Cisco GoToMeeting type of software. Maybe they're using Zoom or Google Hangouts or something like that, that maybe it's not a traditional platform that you're used to. And that's important to know because if you don't think about those things ahead of time, there may be software or plugins or things you need to have downloaded for a remote interview that you just don't really think about until you actually get to logging into the interview that day. And you don't want the login process to make you late. You don't want to have unexpected things you have to download and tech problems when you get started. So it's important to know your computer, know your system, know your microphone, your internet, your camera setup, all of that stuff, as well as you can ahead of time. Usually when recruiters send out links for remote interviews, you can typically click the link and try to open up the meeting ahead of time, which will tell you, it'll ask you to download software you might need. And you can do this a day or two ahead of time, and, usually it'll say, like, this meeting hasn't started yet or something like that, but it should still allow you to click the link and to just make sure that everything is working. Doing all that stuff ahead of time allows you, one, to not have to raise your anxiety levels when you're trying to quickly get it done right before your interview. It helps you have a clean start for your interview, and it helps you to be a little proactive in reaching out to the recruiter if there are any challenges or problems, with the link ahead of time. Asking for guidance, assistance, that looks really good if you're doing that days ahead of time rather than logging in late because all your technology just was crashing on you. This is the new way business is happening for many people across the country. And so the skills in being able just to get on, log in, and successfully be present on camera with, with adequate volume and sound and ready to go on time is a skill that is good to show right off the bat. I understand not everyone has the best internet connection, and not everyone's connection is going to be, perfect from their home. But it's good to just think about that ahead of time. Maybe test calling a friend or something over video just to test how video and audio from your end travel. Obviously, it's different platform to platform, but doing a simple video call is probably going to be helpful just to see if your internet connection at home has any lag time or cuts out or anything like that. During your interview, you may even want to think about asking friends and family who may be in your homes to disconnect from the internet for a little bit of time during the duration of your interview. You may want to close other programs on your laptop or phone that may be connecting to the internet, even if you don't know they are, just so that you're not, sharing all of that internet bandwidth with other people in your home. Disconnecting devices, things like that, that are going to be taking up some of your internet bandwidth may be helpful just to make sure that, your connection works itself out during the course of your interview. Battery power versus plugging your laptop or technology in is also something good to know. It may not always be possible for you to have power access depending on where you're at, where you have to do the interview. So it's good to just make sure that if you are of utmost necessity using your phone for an interview, which we'll talk about that in a minute, that your phone has not been used all day and then you're taking an interview at 3 o'clock and you're at like 10% battery life. You want to make sure that you're, that you've planned ahead for that type of thing. And like I said, make sure you have the software downloaded. There's nothing worse than scrambling at the last minute because you realize you don't have something that you need in order to use your webcam or something that you need in order to use their meeting link. Any of that stuff that you can do ahead of time is going to be helpful. So yeah, I mean, technology is probably the biggest issue with remote interviewing because it's, the thing that if we don't plan ahead for it, there's always unexpected glitches in the process. And as much as I would love for all employers to be understanding when this happens, this is often your first big answer to a question in the interview process. Can you get logged in? Can you get successfully connected? And how's that going? And so if you have questions about that or want to test out a Skype call, feel free to reach out to me and I'll send you a meeting link and we can make sure your laptop and everything seems to be functional and working for at least our meeting platform. I'm willing to do that for you. But think about your technology ahead of time. Second thing that I think is important for remote or virtual interviews is just the space itself. It's natural when you're in your own space to default to your own habits or behaviors in that space. When you walk into a meeting room in person, it's a table and chairs maybe. And so you naturally kind of know, like, this is a formal environment. This is a place that I'm at for an interview that's professional and whatnot. But when you're doing Skype interviews, it's natural to want to, just, hang out on the couch or do them in the recliner or whatever. And you want to really think about your body language and the space and the environment in which you're doing these interviews in, to the extent that you can really control it. I understand, especially during this time of crisis, you can't go to the library and use the local interviewing room, that you may have to do it from home, but it's good to just know the environment that you're around and try to make that environment as interview or remote friendly as possible. Your microphone can pick up a lot of things, so you want to make sure that the room or that you have some relative quietness in the space that you're in, or at least that you recognize that you are going to need to mute your microphone or something throughout the interview. But doing that also creates a challenge that you want to make sure that you're always unmuting and muting yourself at the right time so that you don't start answering questions and get thrown off because no one can hear you with your microphone muted. Lighting's also a big issue, especially when you're dealing with cameras. Cameras pick up lighting in different ways. Your webcams, you can't adjust the aperture like you can on your nice photo camera. And so you have to deal with what you've got when it comes to lighting. Sitting with a window behind you is often going to make you glow. It's going to make the window glow, and it may be just way too bright, and it's going to make the rest of your body fade into dark, you can't see it. So all the light's going to be behind you rather than shining on you. And you don't want to be a silhouette in the camera, but you also don't want to blind whoever's looking at them with all this, natural light coming in from behind you. If you have lots of windows, it's best to have the window shining on you rather than coming in from behind you. So like, for instance, right now I have windows in my house, and they're here out in the distance shining back on me rather than me sitting in front of the window. The other good thing to remember is the backdrop. People get really creative with their backdrops, and you don't have to. Something plain is fine, like you're just looking at a plain backdrop right now. But again, my backdrop isn't distracting. You don't see a messy bedroom. You don't see, a kitchen with dishes that needed to be done. You don't see family or whatever walking behind you and looking casually over your shoulder, into the camera while I'm sitting here. So it's important to think and just be aware of what's behind you while you're talking, because distracting things can pull the interviewer away from looking at you and pull them to whatever's happening in the background. And you want them to focus on you and your answers and what you're giving them, not something from behind you. So think about the backdrop, and then watch what distractions are in the foreground, what you're looking at. I have a room here full of all sorts of things. And if you're doing an interview, it's good to know what's potentially distracting in this room that may carry my attention away from what I'm actually doing at the moment. When you're not in a room with physical people in the present space, it's easy to just, as other people are talking on the call, to start looking around and to start just, focusing on what someone else is doing in another room if you can see them, all sorts of things. And your attention gets drawn away from what is actually happening on the call. So think about what's in the room or the space that's around you. And then this is a funny one. It's always fun on a class Skype call or when I'm calling people from different places on video, that animals always become a problem. And usually it's a fun problem to have. It's a cute problem to have when the cat walks across the table, or when someone has to pick up their dog because they're scratching at their feet or whatever. In normal calls, that's probably not a big deal. But when you're doing a remote interview, it's good to know, just make sure that you're keeping those types of distractions away. It's good, to have that consistency so you don't get stopped in the middle of a question and then forget where you're going with your train of thought, and that the call, again, the attention doesn't get co-opted from what you're doing to, what your cat looks like walking across the table. And again, all of this stuff about the space is very contextual. It's dependent on what you're able to do in your home or whatever you've got to work with at the moment. I understand that that's difficult sometimes, but it's also good just to know that it's a thing that you need to be aware of, and to try to get to a point where you have some sort of good, focused environment for you to take the call in. You don't have to go way out of your way, but you also want to make sure that you're not selling yourself short because people actually can't listen to you. They can't focus on you. They're focusing on something else. So it's good to just limit that distraction ahead of time. The third thing I want to talk about is just the interview itself. We all have heard traditional interviewing strategies, and Skype interviews, as far as questions, can sometimes be pretty similar. Professional dress is still expected for the interview, unless they tell you otherwise. I would still, if I came out here right now just, wearing a t-shirt or whatever, like, it just shows that there's not the initiative to actually take the interview seriously. And some companies are more laid back, and professional dress isn't important maybe for them, but it's usually those companies that will tell you, don't worry about professional dress for the interview. I would say it's good to err on the side of interview attire for your interview rather than not doing that. Keep the eye contact is one thing that you're always told in a real in-person interview. But on a remote interview side, it's very difficult to do that because there's no one that you're looking at per se. But the good thing to know is that your laptop or your camera usually will have some sort of little light, green, blue, red light, whatever, wherever the camera is when it's on and actually recording. And it's good to look at that light because there's two things that can happen. One, you're just looking around the room when you're talking. You're not actually focusing and talking directly to whoever it is that you're talking to. Or you're looking at the screen. So you're watching them rather than actually paying direct attention to the camera. That's a hard thing to do because we like to watch the person we're talking to, so we're naturally looking down at them on the screen rather than the camera. But that little light's there for a reason. It tells you where you need to look and that the camera's on. But it's good to just look and try to keep as much focus on the camera as possible since you can't do eye contact. Please know that you may need to speak up. Whoever's interviewing you, their audio or speakers or headphones may not, have the volume power, or your microphone may not be able to pick you up very well. You can check if your mic is picking you up generally in your computer settings ahead of time. But it's good to know that you may just need to speak up a little more than usual because the microphone's got to pick you up, and then whoever's listening has to be able to play it back, depending on whatever their settings are. It's better for them to have to adjust the volume a little bit than to try to turn you up because they can't hear you. So it's always good to just think that you may need to speak a little bit louder for the interview than you might otherwise. The one big thing too about mock or remote interviews or virtual interviews, I've been in mock interview mode all week for virtual interviews, so I keep saying mock interview, but for virtual video Skype interviews, you want to watch speaking too quickly. It's good to provide a second or two of silence between the question and your answer, and between your answer and their response, or between them and you talking. Only because it's easy to jump in and interrupt in a Skype interview or a virtual interview because you don't know when the conversation's ending, especially since you can't directly always see them and read their body language to know when a thought is complete or to know when they're done talking. And so it's easy for us on an interview, especially when you're a little bit more anxious than usual because you're in the interview mode, to try to jump in. And on a call, that can sometimes be, get a little too common, and it's good to just let there be a space of silence, then speak. You don't want it to be a long space where they're waiting forever for you to answer, but just enough to where they're not going to follow up with a sub-point to their question or follow up with a sub-question or something like that. You just want to make sure that you're not jumping in too quickly. Have a copy of your resume and cover letter on hand, ready to go to reference. I mean, obviously you would usually bring these to a regular interview to provide them to people who may not have them when you come in, but they also may reference things to your resume and cover letter that you need to think about. So you need to have a copy of it for yourself so that if they reference something on your resume or they ask a question about something in your cover letter, you can quickly reference that and then answer the question. I mean, you should know those documents, before going into the interview, but sometimes they may need a clarifying point or something like that, and it's good, even though you can't give them to someone during the interview, to have them present with you while you're taking the interview. You can take notes. In fact, it's important to do that, but note-taking strategies, you need to make sure that they can either see you writing or something so that they don't know or that they don't get the impression that you're just not paying attention. It's good, for them to be able to see a pen and writing, that you're taking notes as they're talking, if you're asking them a question or something, but don't do that off to the side where it looks like you're just not paying attention to the call itself. And then it's just always good to be prepared, especially for remote interviews that, again, are traditionally those entryway, gatekeeper interviews, to know and be ready for some of those traditional, maybe even cliche interview questions. Strengths, weaknesses, why do you want this position? What do you know about our company? What excites you about the work that you're doing? Those types of general questions are good to just be ready for, because, in traditional life, the Skype interview is going to be more that initial startup time, or the initial kind of weeding out period of candidates. It's also helpful to just go through a company's Glassdoor page and see what interview questions others have reported. People can leave reviews on Glassdoor to show interview questions that the company has been asking to other candidates, so that you can kind of get an idea for what may be coming towards or coming to you in your interview. Again, that's glassdoor.com. You can find those career questions or those interview questions there. Have a pitch for yourself ready to go. Start off the interview in a strong manner. Give an introduction to yourself, what you're interested in, why you applied for the position, and just tell them a little bit about you and your story in a short, concise, maybe 60-second time period at the beginning of the interview. They're almost always going to ask you to tell them a little bit about yourself in any interview setting. And if you're in Business 365, you probably know this already, or Cable, for instance. We do a lot of work with this, but it's often the interview question that people don't know how to answer. And if you start off the interview on a question that is very, well, I don't know if I really did that one as well as I could have, it can affect the rest of the interview. So it's good to start off in a strong manner and to be ready to go and to have confidence after your first question going into the rest of the interview. So have a pitch ready and have questions for them ready to go at the end of the interview. Have questions about the company or things that you can't easily identify on the company website. You don't want to ask questions like, what do you do? But it's good to have some sort of questions ready that are detailed and thought through for the company at the end of the interview. And then practice recording your responses. I'm going to offer an opportunity for all of you who are watching this to record some interview responses, and then I can provide some feedback for you. But practice recording video responses where you don't have time to think about it. You're just given a question and you have to go and give an answer. Because if you just record videos of you answering questions where you've had 5 minutes to think about it, that's not necessarily as helpful. But it's good to have someone ask you questions and you record videos, and then just watch yourself, your body language, the answers that you're giving, like all of that type of stuff, to kind of gauge what you need to work on. Ohio Means Jobs actually has a tool that allows you to do this, and you can log on to Ohio Means Jobs, click Individuals, and then click Practice Interviews. So Ohio Means Jobs interviews are individuals practice interviews. And there you can actually give them to give you practice interviews where you get a question and then you'll use your webcam to record a quick response. You can save those videos or download them, and I will open it up to allow any of you who are watching this, if you want to, just get feedback on your practice interviews and your questions that you're answering, go on to Ohio Means Jobs and start taking some of those questions and recording videos for them, and then send them to me. Send them to me, and I will provide you feedback through email, or we can talk about it on a phone call or something like that. You can save them right there on Ohio Means Jobs, and then send them to me. Make sure you create an account before you can, so you can make sure you keep them saved. But I think that would be really helpful for all of you who are interested in practicing this. So obviously, there's a lot more that you can talk about for interviews themselves, but this is just a little bit of an overview of some things to think about as you're, getting ready to go into a mock interview or a virtual interview or an interview over Skype or something with a company. It's important just to think about, because you never know. Sometimes we're so used to meeting and answering and interviewing in person that as familiar as we may be with technology and with our computer and all of these things, sometimes there's just some stuff that goes missed. And so it's good to think about that and to prepare. Again, Feel free to send me practice interviews that you may have done through Ohio Means Jobs, or feel free if you want to set up an entire mock interview with me via Skype. Send me an email and I will do that. Well, we are almost at 30 minutes, and our first live session with you all is coming to an end. Again, we're going to do this every Tuesday and Thursday for about 30 minutes. Grab a cup of coffee and hang out for a little bit. Ask any questions you want in the comment section or shoot me an email, and I'll get back to you with answers as soon as I am able to. Don't forget, if you're in YU, mock interviews are coming up, and advising is here. So meet with your faculty member, make sure you're responding to emails, checking your email regularly, and good luck. And stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk soon. Take care.